The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. But you blew with your breath and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty
God's presence was with them, leading as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. When they reached Marah, the people cried out because the water was bitter. Moses prayed, and God showed him a piece of wood. When he placed it in the water, it became sweet. They pitched their tents in the wilderness. When they cried out in hunger, God sent manna from heaven. God instructed them to collect manna daily, not to store it for the next day, but on the sixth day they were to gather extra because the seventh day was the Sabbath, and no manna would fall. They moved to Massah, where they were thirsty and had no water to drink. When Moses struck the rock with his staff, water flowed from it. They continued their journey and fought a war against the Amalekites. God gave them victory, and they named the place Jehovah Nissi, meaning the Lord is my banner. Moses ascended Mount Sinai as God had instructed. The Lord spoke to him directly, while the people of Israel stood below, hearing the thunder and seeing lightning upon the mountain. Fearful and in awe, they waited for Moses. There God declared that he would make a covenant with his people. Moses descended and met with the elders, consecrating holiness throughout the camp in preparation for God's instructions. Then he went back up the mountain where God gave him the 10 Commandments, along with instructions for building the tabernacle and other laws for guiding his people. He commanded his people, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. Have no other gods before him. Do not worship idols, misuse his name, or neglect his holy day. Honor him fully. And just as you love God, so must you love those around you. Honor your father and mother. Do not take life, betray trust, steal, lie, or envy." Moses remained on the mountain for 40 days. Seeing his delay, the people feared he would not return. In their impatience, they fashioned a golden calf and began to worship it. When Moses came down carrying the stone tablets given by God, he saw the idol and the people's disobedience. In grief and righteous anger, he shattered the tablets. The people repented for their sin, and Moses ascended the mountain once more to plead for their forgiveness before God. In his mercy, God renewed his covenant and gave Moses the commandments again. Upon returning, Moses purified the camp and led the construction of the tabernacle, establishing a sacred place for God's presence among his people. God called Moses into the tabernacle, where his presence would fill the sacred space. This marked a new chapter, God dwelling among his people. He commanded the Israelites to gather at his holy place 3 times a year: the Passover, remembering their redemption from Egypt; the Feast of First Fruits, celebrating provision; and the Feast of Tabernacles, honoring his abiding presence. The tabernacle had 2 inner chambers. The most holy place, where the Ark of the Covenant rested, contained manna and the 10 Commandments, the very signs of God's covenant. Here his presence dwelled. The holy place, separated by a veil, held the menorah and the table of showbread, symbols of light and sustenance. Before entering, purification was required. In the outer courtyard, the altar stood for sacrifices, and a laver of water cleansed those who approached. On the dedication day, when high priest entered the most holy place with the offering on behalf of the people, God came down as fire onto the tabernacle. God instructed them to keep the holiness of the congregation. Each day at dawn, priests purified themselves. The morning burnt offering was placed on the altar, its smoke rising as a sign of devotion. Throughout the day, peace offerings were presented. Sin and trespass offerings provided atonement, as individuals sought forgiveness. By evening, the second burnt offering was given. The menorah was refilled with oil, its light symbolizing God's presence. The final prayers lifted as the day ended, preparing for another sacred cycle of worship. Purification starts from individual level, keeping himself holy by obeying law, worshiping God, and keeping his commands. This includes sin offering. Family level, worshiping God along with family, festival of Passover, where families get prepared for his will. And community level, where sin of all the congregation is purified during Day of Atonement. As the tabernacle stands the symbol of the covenant with people of Israel, they have to keep the holiness of the congregation by following God's commands. God instructed them to follow the festivals to remember the great things God has done. Sabbath, a weekly day of rest, reminding Israel of God's creation and their dependence on Him. Passover, a commemoration of Israel's deliverance from Egypt, marked by the sacrifice of the lamb. Each family will sacrifice a lamb without blemish. First fruits, a thanksgiving offering, acknowledging God as the provider of the harvest. Day of Atonement, a solemn day of repentance, where the high priest makes atonement for the sins of the people. He lays hands on the lamb, showing the sin of the congregation is laid upon the lamb, and sacrifice it for purifying the congregation. Another lamb will be sent to wilderness to carry the sin away from them. And high priest enters most holy place with the blood of sacrificed lamb and cleansing the tabernacle, and God descends onto the tabernacle to bless the people. Feast of Tabernacles, a celebration of God's provision during the journey as a reminder of His presence. The tabernacle was placed at the center of the camp, surrounded by the Levites. The 12 tribes were arranged in a square formation around them, divided into 4 groups. East, led by Judah, accompanied by Issachar and Zebulun. Judah was the most prominent tribe, symbolizing leadership. South, led by Reuben, joined by Simeon and Gad. West, led by Ephraim, accompanied by Manasseh and Benjamin. North, led by Dan, alongside Asher and Naphtali. The Levites were divided into 3 clans. Gershonites, they were responsible for carrying the tabernacle's coverings, curtains, and ropes. Merarites, their duty was to transport the structural components, including the frames, posts, and bases. Kohathites, they carried the most sacred objects, the Ark of the Covenant, the lampstand, the altars, and other holy furnishings. God appointed elders, heads, and judges to lead and uphold justice among His people. He also set apart Nazirites who took a sacred vow of dedication. As the Israelites journeyed through the wilderness, they cried out for meat, weary of manna. God answered by sending quail, but their greed brought judgment. Later, when faced with thirst, God commanded Moses to talk to the rock. He struck a rock, and water flowed to sustain them. When fiery serpents struck the people for their disobedience, God instructed Moses to raise a bronze serpent. All who looked upon it were healed. During battle, as Israel fought against Amalek, victory came only when Moses raised his hands, showing their reliance on God's power.